I am Kate Herron, and I am the director of Loki.
So I want to talk about Loki's character arc in this season. He started fresh off his loss at the Battle of New York and went through an incredible change. And it got me thinking how in WandaVision and Falcon and the Winter Soldier, we saw characters dramatically transform into something else. Like literally, like Wanda became the Scarlet Witch, Falcon became Captain America. So I ask you, what did Loki become?
I think for me, like the really key thing for Loki is that he's become a whole different version of himself, right? In terms of like, because I think that was the trick with the whole show, right? Is that for me, he's had one of the most satisfying arcs across the MCU, but it's because they did that over 10 years. And it felt in a way almost natural and earned seeing him go from this villain to this anti-hero. And I think for me, the real key things are, you know, in episode 1, he wants the throne and he wants power, and it's a very selfish one. Whereas by episode 6, he's just saying to Sylvie, I want you to be okay. And that is coming from a place of love and empathy. And I think it shows like what a massive journey he's been on just in those 6 episodes.
All I know is I don't want to hurt you.
Absolutely. And I just thought it was just crazy, that he started as wanting to be a conqueror. And by the end, he was out to be a savior.
Yeah. And I think it's also because he couldn't stop it. And like, I think, but one thing that was really important for me was that, you know, when he lands back in the TVA and his heart shattered, I didn't want to just, I think for me, I know I would be distressed as a fan if we just left him there looking like completely like, what the hell just happened? And I think I always thought of that line, like Loki survive. And I wanted to shoot it in that long push in because Tom did such a beautiful performance. But, you know, you see that change, you know, that he's like, okay, this is rock bottom. The plan went wrong. The person that I love, like, it's completely just shattered me. But at the same time, he has that switch where he's like, no, I still have fight. I'm still strong. And yeah, Loki's always survived. And you see him like collect himself and then he gets up and he goes. And I think that was really important for me to show, was that it isn't diminishing the journey that this Loki has been on just because he didn't necessarily get a good consequence at the end. Like sometimes, you know, you can go through growth and change and bad things still happen, but the fact that he's willing to fight through those and, you know, has hope. I think hope was, I guess, the quicker answer to give you with him.
Oh, I love that. I just got nerd chills like hearing you explain that. That's so cool. And you mentioned, you know, the person Loki loves, which is of course Sylvie. And at the end, you know, she made a big decision. She decided to kill He Who Remains. And it turns out he was not lying about the bad stuff that would happen if he died. So in that moment, you know, where Sylvie sees what her actions have done, you know, with the time stream splintering, does she think she made the wrong choice? And where does she even go from there?
I think that's the interesting thing, right? Because I always think about Sylvie in episode 6, almost where Loki was in Thor. You know, like she's completely driven by like anger and revenge and like from a very dark place. And I think that's what's even worse when he's talking to her and he's trying to explain like, you know, please don't do this. Like you're not going to get what you want, because he's been there. But the thing is, like, she's not him. So she's like, I'm going to do it. But I think that was the important thing to show as well. Like you said to, like at the end of her mission, she did do her mission. She did exactly what she set out for, but she didn't, you know, revenge is empty and it was fueled by hate and it hasn't led to her feeling any more full. It's still hollow. So I think for me, I hope that she feels less hollow. That'd be my hope in the future with Sylvie.
And on the subject of He Who Remains, Kevin Feige has already said that Jonathan Majors is playing Kang the Conqueror in Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. So I'd love to hear, you know, what kind of impression did you want to make on the audience with He Who Remains, knowing that we'd all be seeing a much more evil variant of him down the road? Yeah,
well, I think for me, like, I first came from the writing, right? Like I know the writers were really inspired by like entrepreneurs and like that kind of like showmanship. And so that we had, me and Jonathan had a lot of fun discussing that. And I think for us, it was finding those key moments where it was very clear that, you know, he was lying or he wasn't lying. And I think it was so important, that line where he says, you know, if you think I'm evil, just wait until you meet my variants. Because as a fan, I'm like, excellent. But also I'm like, oh no, that's terrible, because he, you know, it's interesting, right? Because on one hand, it's like, has he done something so terrible if these other variants are as evil as he says? And he looks so afraid in that moment. And I think that's what makes the sort of debate between Sylvie and Loki so juicy. But yeah, I think for me it was really working with Jonathan on just what would this character be like, who's basically living in isolation like so many of us were and are still at the end of time, and like the main character he talks to is a talking clock. Yeah, so like what's the introvert and extrovert with this guy, like who is he? And I think that was the real key thing. But yeah.
Cool. So obviously the finale of Loki is going to have far-reaching effects on the MCU and Phase 4 and all that. So I'm curious, have you talked with the directors of Spider-Man and Ant-Man and the Wasp and Doctor Strange?
No, so Marvel, the way they do it, basically, it tends to be more like, so Kevin Wright and Stephen Broussard were like our executives across the show, and they are very good. Is it a bit like working for maybe like the Pentagon or something? But basically, you only know as much information as you need to know. But obviously, they manage our show, and they would let me and the writers know if anything needed to be steered another way. But like but we never had that, to be honest. I never felt like we were restricted. But no, I don't really. I think the only director I really spoke to was Peyton, because we're both casting Jonathan. But that was it, really. Yeah, I have no idea what's happening in the other ones, unfortunately. I'd love to know, but
like, wow, the level of secrecy never ceases to amaze me.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. It was so great talking to you. And wow, this show blew my mind. So amazing job to you and your whole team.
Thank you so much. Cheers. Thank you.